Are you a frequent flyer looking for a tool to help you track all of your flights and travel stats in one place? From being able to view all of your travels on an AR map to seeing how many hours you've spent in the air, check out App in the Air. Learn more and check out the app for free by using the link in the show notes and get 20% off of your next flight when you book directly through App in the Air by using the code Geobreeze at checkout. Thank you to App in the Air for partnering with this episode of the Geobreeze Travel Podcast. Welcome to the Geobreeze Travel Podcast, a show for anyone wanting to level up their travel hacking lifestyle. I'm your host, Julia Menez. I'm a travel hacker, coach, speaker, Filipino-American ENTJ who loves solid travel gear and using shortcuts on spreadsheets. On this show, I'm on a mission to bring you travel hackers from all walks of life to help you level up your travel hacking game. We dive into credit cards, miles, points, strategy, mindset, and the secrets behind how to travel the world for next to no cost. So, let's get hacking.
Most people hate organizing trips. The idea of like, what are the right flights? What are the right hotels? Where are we going to go? How are we going to get there? That is a chore to a lot of people. And if someone's going to volunteer to take on that chore, it is a giant blessing. And so the first time we thought about doing this, I said, oh, let me plan this bachelor party. And I was like, okay, we had a lot of people, right? This was like a 15, 20 person bachelor party. And I said, let me plan it all. And, I know people like earning points, but I also know people hate planning trips. So I said, look, here's the deal. I'll plan the whole trip, but I'm going to book all the flights. And, I would even email the airlines and set up group fares, which, by the way, if anyone listening wants to do this, the group fare desk is an amazing resource because you can usually lock in rates in advance. If you need to change names or cancel a couple people, there's a lot of opportunities to do that. Whereas if you just buy a ticket, it's really hard to change the name. It's actually probably impossible to change the name.
Hey there, points people. You just heard a clip from Chris Hutchins. Chris is an avid financial optimizer and host of the top-ranked podcast, All the Hacks, where he shares his quest to upgrade his life without having to spend a fortune. He has been featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and CNBC. In this episode, Chris and I discuss how he has earned more than 11 million points and miles, many of them by planning bachelor parties and other group travel, and how you can take advantage of group rates with airlines. If you are looking to earn a lot of points and miles by booking hotel and plane tickets, check out the Capital One Venture X card. This card lets you earn 10 points per dollar on hotels and 5 points per dollar on flights when you book through the Capital One portal, and you'll also earn 2x on all other purchases, making it one of the best cards for miscellaneous expenses out there. You'll also get lounge access, $100 towards global entry or TSA PreCheck, and $300 annually as a statement credit towards travel booked through the Capital One portal. Remember, if you're interested in applying for the Venture X or any other card, make sure you use a friend or creator's referral or affiliate links rather than applying directly through Google or mailers. If you are interested in supporting this show when you apply for your next card, check out geobreezetravel.com/cards, and we have a link to the Venture X for you in the show notes as well. And now, on with the show. Hey, Chris, welcome to the Geobreeze Travel Podcast.
I am excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you here. We met at FinCon last year when we were both nominated for Best New Podcast. Neither of us won, but it's fine. And now we are friends and get to hang out on each other's podcast. So I'm super excited to have you here. We're going to talk about why you have 11 million points sitting in your accounts and also how you earned a lot of these points and how you earned a lot of points back in the day. Before we get into all of that, take us back to the beginning and tell us how you got into the game of points and miles.
Yeah, so it's been so long. I was fortunate to grow up in a family with a father who also liked points, but I don't think I fully appreciated it until I could actually get a credit card. So my dad was kind enough to use his points so that we could, take some trips as a kid, but I never as a kid was like, "Oh, this is free or not." It didn't really click for me. And then in college, a bunch of people were flying to Cabo. And I was like, I want to go on this trip. But I was like, I don't really have the money to go on this trip. And I had points, but I never used them. And so I was like, oh, I wonder if I could use them. And I believe they're American points. And I used them to go to Cabo. And I was like, oh my God, I just went on a free trip that I wanted to go on and couldn't afford. I got to keep doing this. And then I realized, oh my gosh, if you get a credit card and you use the right card and you spend it in the right way, you get more points. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
What were some of the first cards that you got back in the day in college?
The longest card I've had and no longer have because I failed to keep regular spend on it was just kind of like the standard United card. And it was like the anchor of my credit report because I'd had it for over, I think at the time it got canceled, it was over 2 decades maybe. It was like a 20-year card. And it just one day was like, this card is no longer active. And, I don't think the United card happens to be the best card to spend on. I'd rather spend on my Sapphire Reserve, but it would been there for so long. I was so bummed. Now I have calendar reminders every year to go make sure I put a purchase on every single card. But that was the first one. I remember another point where in one day, there was I don't know if this is still true. You probably do. But if you signed up for a bunch of cards in one day, you could get all the bonus miles with only one credit check. And so I opened 3 American Airlines cards back when they had a 75,000 point sign up bonus. That was one of the early goings, which netted 225,000 points, which was pretty cool.
I've heard these days, if you're going to try for multiple cards on the same day, use different banks. Like you can get a Chase card and an Amex card and a Citi card if you wanted to go for multiple sign up bonuses in one try. If you're trying to go for multiple like Chase cards, it's probably not going to fly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. This was City, so maybe it would still work. I imagine Capital One neither too. They're pretty strict.
Capital One's pretty strict. All right. So as you started getting more and more into points, how were you earning points in college? Were you just
Yeah.
doing sign up bonuses or something else?
So in college, it was mostly sign up bonuses and paying for dinner. I think this was early in the points world. Let's call it early 2000s. And there wasn't the points guide to my knowledge. And points was pretty something we just didn't talk about a lot. And so at dinner, if you were like, I'll get the bill, you can all give me cash, you can all send me money. I don't even think Venmo exists. I don't even know how we did. Honestly, I'm like thinking back, how did we? But it was probably cash. And I would always be like, I'll just pay and you guys can give me cash. And that we weren't spending a lot of money in college. We we weren't going out to fancy dinners, so I don't think it was that many points. But every time we did anything, I would always volunteer to pay, and no one seemed to. Later in life, when I started kind of points evangelizing, I would feel guilty. I'd be like, "No, you don't have as many points as me. Let's let you pay for the bill, and I'll just Venmo you." But in college, I was new to the game, and I was taking every opportunity I have. So that was the bulk of it was sign up bonuses, which I didn't have the best credit because getting started, you don't have a lot of things on your credit report. So I didn't do a lot of card sign up, but a handful. But it was all of that and then flying home for, the holidays. I would earn my United miles. And then I don't know if they still do it, but they used to give you something like 25,000 miles when you graduate. So there was a program back when I was in college, at least, that if you sent in your transcript and you graduated college, you got a bonus, and it was a meaningful bonus. It was like tens of thousands of miles. 10,000, I'm wrong. 10,000 free United miles for graduating college students. So maybe it seemed like a lot, that maybe 10,000 miles, maybe with all the devaluations, maybe 10,000 miles went a long way 10 years ago.
After this, were you already redeeming points at this point, or were you just kind of collecting points to be able to go on another bigger trip later on? Or were you just kind of like keeping up with spring breaks and other friends' trips?
Yeah, so the first big trip, so booking a trip to Mexico was nothing too crazy. I remember I took maybe like one trip to go home with points or maybe my dad's points, but I got to book it. And then I remember taking one trip with Continental Miles before they merged with United to go to Europe with my then girlfriend, now wife. And that was like a big trip. We were like, we are going to Europe. We flew into, I think, Paris and out of Barcelona. And we did like a whirlwind trip for 2 weeks. And both flights were with miles. And that was like, I felt like that was the coolest thing in the world because prior to that, it had all been coach tickets going, 2 hours here, 3 hours there. This was still economy because I didn't have enough miles to go business at the time, but it was international and it was free. And it was probably the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And my wife had never been to Europe. And so the idea that we're going to go to Europe together for free was amazing.
That is amazing. And I feel like it's those like first points trips where you're like, well, now I'm super hooked on this because even if it's economy, it doesn't matter. And I think a lot of people are always afraid to kind of use miles at all because they're like, oh, well, I need like one of those Emirates first class suites for this to be memorable. It's memorable either way. If you get a free flight to Europe, it's totally memorable either way.
Every time someone sends me a message and says, "Hey, I'm trying to get my spouse or significant other or girlfriend into the points game. What do you recommend?" And I'm like, don't try to convince them to open cards and do it. Plan a trip, and then after the fact, be like, "Oh, that trip was free." And like that's the moment where I think it clicked. And my wife is now, I catch her in moments being even more optimal than I am, where she's like, "Oh, I did this thing where I checked the shopping portal. And then I also used this card because it was this like obscure thing." And I'm like, "Oh, this is amazing." And she doesn't do it because she's as obsessed with like the optimization game. She does it because she likes going on free vacations. Like at the end of the day, free vacations drives a lot of behavior for people in the miles and points world.
Absolutely. Spend your points, get free vacations. But speaking of hoarding points, why do you have 11 million points sitting in your accounts right now?
So I wish that I had a really good excuse. I have an excuse for like a third of them, maybe, but certainly not one that covers it all. You know, when I was running a startup, things were a little crazy and I just didn't have the time to travel, but we were buying some ads, and that probably accounts for a million of the points, maybe a million and a half were from big ad spend bonuses on spending money on Facebook or Google ads. And so that's, I'll give myself like a little credit, but that's only like 15% of the points. The rest of them is that I really struggle to spend points when it's not optimal. When I'm like, because I've had the fortunate pleasure, I guess, of booking trips where I end up getting 10 cents a mile, 15 cents, like these crazy redemptions going, halfway around the world in first class on $20,000 tickets that I paid nothing for. Every time I'm booking, I'm like, gosh, well, I know those points can take me further if I use them this way. And I feel like I'm getting better there. Now I'm just like, is it a good deal? It doesn't have to be the best deal. But at the end of the day, it takes a while to burn through points if you're not traveling that much. And now that we have, we've had a pandemic for 2 years with not that much travel, but now we have our second child on the way. We have an au pair. So I can see a world where a year from now we're not traveling with 2, we're traveling with 5. So I could definitely see these points starting to get used more than they have in the past. But yes, I have a problem of hoarding points, and I need to work on it.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a points hoarder.
Definitely. I have a real problem. Someone wrote a post the other day about why cents per mile is like a horrible thing. And by coming up with a metric and benchmarking it, all of a sudden you're like, well, if I don't get 4 cents a mile, it's not worth it. And at the end of the day, like if you get to go on an amazing vacation and you didn't have to stress out about spending the money that maybe you needed for something else, maybe you didn't even have, like that was a good use. Like if you took a vacation, it was a good use of points. And so we shouldn't probably, not that I'm guilty of it, but like the idea of telling someone, "Oh, this isn't a good use, don't use your points." You could say, if you have 3 trips and this is one, maybe use your points on another one. But if you're just trying to take one trip and you want to save some money and you have the points, like if you took the trip, it's a good use. And I need to practice that more than I preach it, because oftentimes I'm like, it's better. Let's just buy this flight. And, I look at myself like, wow, this is crazy.
It is a blessing and a curse being able to do those types of calculations of like cents per point redemption, because some people will just be like, oh, I got a free trip. And then decisions were made and trips were had and everybody had fun. So clearly, you're very good at earning a lot of points. So, can you walk us through what are some of the ways that you've earned a lot of these points? Because that's a lot more than just sign up bonuses. I don't think anybody can get to 11 million points with sign up bonuses in a short amount of time. So, what are some of the ways in the past that you have earned a lot of points?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is becoming what I'll call an amateur travel agent. So I would imagine most of the people listening to this podcast are excited about miles and points, right? Like I literally started a podcast like you did, all about my desire to hack everything. Now, it's not just about travel and miles and credit cards, but it's a big part of it. And so because I love travel, I spent a bunch of time thinking about airlines and routes and ways to do things and booking hotels. And it's just kind of something I enjoy. So, what happened in about a couple years after university, I noticed that friends of mine were getting married and someone said, "Oh, let's go on a trip." And, I would say most of these trips were kind of the bachelor party and maybe even the bachelorette party my wife was going on. Some of them were just group trips. But what I realized was that most people hate organizing trips. The idea of like, what are the right flights? What are the right hotels? Where are we going to go? How are we going to get there? That is a chore to a lot of people. And if someone's going to volunteer to take on that chore, it is a giant blessing. And so the first time we thought about doing this, I said, "Oh, let me plan this bachelor party." And I was like, "Okay." We had a lot of people, right? This was like a 15, 20 person bachelor party. And I said, "Let me plan it all." And, I know people like earning points, but I also know people hate planning trips. So I said, "Look, here's the deal. I'll plan the whole trip, but I'm going to book all the flights." And, I would even email the airlines and set up group fares, which, by the way, if anyone listening wants to do this, the group fare desk is an amazing resource because you can usually lock in rates in advance. If you need to change names or cancel a couple people, there's a lot of opportunities to do that. Whereas if you just buy a ticket, it's really hard to change the name. It's actually probably impossible to change the name. And so I would plan these trips for people. And most of the time I was going. So it's like, oh, I'm going to go on a bachelor party with friends. Why don't I plan the whole thing? And just to break down the math, and I'll just use the most lucrative one. We had 29 people go on a bachelor party to Cabo, which, yes, it was very overwhelming. And I don't recommend that many people, but every now and then there's a big enough group of friends that it just ends up happening. And so I was like, okay, well, I need to get some villas. Like we rented two villas because we couldn't fit in one. And I bought plane tickets for 29 people. And so I'm looking at a doc, and unfortunately, I don't have the price of the flights broken down by person, but it was about $21,000 of flights. And keep in mind, one of the other tricks that I learned just to make trips more equitable is that in every group, at least of 29 people, there's probably some people who have more money than others and more disposable income. And so one of the kind of trip planning hacks we had was we tried to divvy up the types of sleeping accommodations to support different price points for people. So if you got your own private room with your own bed, you paid maybe X. And if you wanted a room with your own bed, but maybe it had two beds, so you weren't sharing a bed, but you had your own room, maybe you paid half of that. And if you were fine sleeping on a couch or a bunk bed or something like that, you'd pay half of that. So some people were paying four times as much as other people, but it meant that everyone could afford to go. Similarly, some of those people wanted to fly down in business class. But if you summed up all the flights, it was about $20,000. And so I was like, cool, I'm going to put that on a platinum Amex. I'm going to earn 5 points per dollar. And that's 100,000 points. Then on the villa, it was, we rented two villas and it was probably almost $20,000 also. So put that, there's no travel card that I know that earns 5 points, but there's a lot that earn three. So 3x on travel, mostly Chase Reserve. Once that came out, there's another 60,000 points. So that's 160,000 points for planning one trip. And it seemed like I had a friend getting married like every 6 months. So I probably planned 5, 10 bachelor parties over the course of, 5 or 10 years, maybe more. And every now and then it would be, oh, my friend's planning his bachelor party. He wants to go to Cabo. Do you want to do that? You want to help them organize it? And I was like, yeah, I'm not even going to go. I'll just email the airline group desk. I'll email a villa company and I'll book it. And depending on how well you trust the people, maybe ask them to pay you up front. If you really trust them, you can pay at the end. And I would just book all these trips and each one, because I had cards that earned enough points per dollar, I'd earn probably anywhere from 50 to 150,000 miles planning a trip. And if you do that a couple times a year, you're racking up, maybe 500,000 points a year if you do three or four of them.
Especially if you can time them with sign up bonuses like, oh, a new bachelor party is coming. Let's get a couple new cards, put them on the new cards. And so that 5x on 20,000 of flights instead of just 100,000 Amex points, that can easily become 200 plus thousand Amex points if you're putting it on a new card.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes people would ask me, I got to know a few people that were pretty well off and they liked booking business class travel and that kind of stuff. And they would just say, hey, can you help me find the most optimal flights? And I would be like, okay, I'll book your flight for you, but I'll put it on my card. So I became like a travel agent. Friends would be like, "Oh, I'm trying to find this hotel." Turns out hotels, most of them aren't prepaid. So even if you book it on your card, it ends up going on the other card. But flights are the opposite. And it kind of has an interesting juxtaposition with travel agents. Most travel agents don't earn any commission on flights. So if you call a travel agent and say, "Hey, can you help me book my flights?" and you're not booking hotels, they're kind of like, this isn't a good thing because they don't make a lot of money, if any. But my deal was, I'm not going to charge you any money to be your travel agent. I'm just going to put it all on my card. So if someone was trying to find someone that could help search fares for different routes and combine things like, I'm sure most people listening know, but if you're trying to go internationally, the airlines that fly from across an ocean aren't always the airlines that have short flights in another region. So if you're looking to go to an island in Thailand and you try to look from San Francisco to that island, you might not find any flights, or you might find the one flight that only Singapore Air flies between San Francisco and that island. But if you know that you need to pair up like, a Jetstar flight or a Thai Air flight with a long haul international flight on a major international carrier, you can line it up. A lot of people don't know that. And so I would win by saying, "Hey, let me help you book these trips. And, I'll put it on my card and you pay me back." And for them, keep in mind when you're planning a bachelor party or something like that, the value to any individual person, that one person's $600 flight, because they probably don't have a platinum Amex getting 5x points. Maybe they have a Chase preferred. It's 1,200 points. So to give away the hassle of trip planning for 1,200 points for them was totally worth it. So I arbitraged that game by just planning travel for people that didn't want to do it and didn't care that they weren't getting the points. And people with the most money cared actually the least about the points. So, sometimes it actually worked out even better.
Tell us a little bit more about the group trip planning for airlines. How many people is the minimum for it to be a group? And it's okay if they're flying from all different airports to the same location or to different locations? Like, what are the parameters for what qualifies for this?
Yeah, so all the airlines have websites where you just search group travel, and they'll usually give you a little bit of a kind of briefing on how it works. On almost all, it's usually 10 people, and you usually, if you're at the minimum, I don't think you always get to drop below, but if you go above the minimum, usually you can drop 10 to 20%. So if you booked a trip with 20 people, you might be able to drop one to four people and still maintain your people still earn miles. It all still works, but it's a slow process. It's like you email someone and they email you back, or maybe you call them and you still are responsible for collecting everyone's names and their, I guess you don't need IDs unless it's international, but you need to collect their birthdays and their gender and their name on their ID. And, you know, that's kind of how it works. You don't really pay a lot of extra fees. What they do, which is a little tricky when you book yourself, is they lock in the fare. So one of the challenges with a group trip is, if anyone's ever gone online on any website, it's like two flights left at this fare. Well, two things are true. One, if you try to book five flights, they usually won't give you two at the lower fare and three at the higher. So one hack here is, if you ever see like two left at this fare, don't buy four, buy two, and then buy two more, and you can get the lower fare. But on a group trick, they kind of solve all of this and they put them all in the fare class, so it's the same price for everyone. So you're not sending a link around to your friends knowing that some people are going to pay $300 and some people are going to pay 500, and so you can kind of lock it in and smooth it out. So you need 10 people. They usually all need to be on the same route. So it's we're booking all from and to the same place. So in our case, a lot of the friend group was already in the Bay Area. For the four or five people that weren't, I would just book those separately.
That makes sense. So if you're having a destination wedding, inviting people from all over the United States, you cannot just organize group fares for them, even if it's like 30 people flying to the same place, if they're all spread out.
Yeah. You could book all of their flights individually on your credit card if you want to manage it all and earn that. That you can definitely do.
How do cancellations or changes work if, like, the flight time has to change, if one person decides they can't make it to the party? What happens then?
Yeah. So on the group stuff, there's this like attrition number. Like I said, it's usually 10 to 20. I was, it could be maybe up to 30 of people that can kind of back out or no show or that kind of stuff. Beyond that, you just eat the cost, right? Like, you're committing to buy a certain number of tickets, and within a certain window, there's not a lot of options there. I don't know how this works now. I haven't done any of this since airlines became a lot more flexible with cancellations and getting credits. So I'm not sure how it works now that a lot of airlines will let you cancel. But when I was doing it more regularly, we tried really hard to make sure that we didn't go under. And in fact, the answer was like, if you want to cancel, I can't get your money back. Like you're in. So um, yeah, you get more flexibility than you normally would, but I don't know how it works specifically if you have to cancel last minute.
Are there any other good negotiation tactics with like villas or anyone else for when you are bringing a large group that can save people a lot when they're traveling?
Yeah, so one good villa hack. So in my first episode of all the hacks, we talked about some travel hacks related to villas. And one of the most important things to think about, and this isn't necessarily a points hack, but villas, whether it's Airbnb, VRBO, or other platforms, in a lot of countries, most of these villas are on lots of platforms. And so the most important thing is to try and find the platform that one is the lowest price, but ideally is the direct line to the owner. And usually there is one where that is the case and a bunch where it's someone else is going to make a commission. So if you can find the direct line to the owner, you're probably more likely to get a good price. And if you can email them directly, you might even have a little bit more leverage because they might have an agreement with all of their travel agencies that help represent the villa that they won't drop the price below a certain price. But that doesn't mean they won't if you deal with them directly. And the hack to find it is to take whatever seems like the most obvious and, iconic picture of the property and do a reverse Google image search. So you take the picture of the VRBO from the cover of the house, do a Google image search, and you can usually find the like 7 other websites that also have that image on it. And every now and then you'll find the one that's actually the villa's website and you can get in touch with the owner directly. And sometimes it's just cheaper straight from that website. So that's one. Gosh, I mean, I would say this is costs more money, but it ends up being a good deal if you have a large group is just hire a chef to cook the meals at the house. It ends up saving you so much money from going out, especially with a group where you're not sure what you're doing. And in a lot of countries, it's actually like surprisingly affordable. If you have 4 people, it can be way more expensive, but if you have 20 people, it can be way less expensive.
Do they take orders from different people, like, where they can cook different things, or is everybody just gonna be eating from, like, the same menu
Yeah, we did all the meals
only?
family style. It's taco night tonight, it's fish night tonight, that was kind of every time we've done a chef at a villa in Mexico, it's just whatever happens. I'm sure that for the right price, you can find someone that will make a menu that people can order off of. But I would say the most inexpensive option is not to and also not to pre-stock your villa and not, a lot of the villa companies, it's like we can pre-stock you with groceries. No, just go to Costco, go to Walmart, and you'll get like a way better price. Similarly, a lot of the chef services, if the villa company organizes it, they send you these like menus for each meal. But if you just work with a chef, you hire a chef, even through the villa company, and deal with them for everything. They just go to the grocery store, they bring you the receipt, and you usually pay them like a 10% bonus on top of the cost of the groceries instead of some fixed $75, $100 per person price. And it's always a much better deal.
Do you ever have issues with people just not paying you back, or, like, a wedding that was gonna happen ended up not happening, and so then you're like, "Well, I guess the bachelor party is not happening," or did you ever have any of these challenges, and if so, how do you navigate them? Because I think that's probably the main thing that would keep people from doing this is, like, I don't wanna deal with 20 people's drama of, "What if they don't pay me back?" or something else going wrong.
Yeah, one of the great things is with group fares and advanced bookings, you can usually make a deposit, and I always tried to collect within the window of refundable because I wanted to make sure that I could get all the money, and if someone wasn't going to pay, I'll just cancel their ticket and I'll say, "Look, you didn't pay. If you want to come down, you have to buy it yourself or I can help you, but I can't get it at the group rate." So that was one. If someone's wedding were to be called off, I could see a world where maybe that's even more reason to go on a group trip. So maybe I don't know how that would have affected, but I haven't dealt with it. But yeah, you have to trust the people. So in almost all of these circumstances, I knew most of the people going and the friends of mine that were, the bachelor or the person organizing would like vouch for everyone and say, look, you could trust these people to pay you back. And we were fortunate that I don't think we ever had any problems. I do think we had to wait. We did have to wait a long time to get paid back. We had a problem where one time we took a trip to Colombia and Spirit Airlines stopped flying to Colombia while we were there. So when we got to the airport to fly home, they said, we don't fly this route anymore. and we needed to get home. And it was a mess because it was like trying to get Spirit to pay you back is it was a lost cause. But everyone had to pay for their own flights, and some people didn't have cards that were getting declined. And there was a lot of cross group coordination that was a challenge. And I will never fly Spirit Airlines on an international route ever again because of that. But no, I think I guess I was lucky that people were all willing to eventually, with enough harassment, pay me back.
The key there is with a lot of harassment. Do you have to chase down people a lot? Because I think that's just one of those things where we always suggest, oh, pay for dinner, have people Venmo you back. And some people just like don't pay you back. I, I like your approach here where like it has to be in the refundable period. You can cancel their airline or their airplane ticket. If they don't pay you back, you just remove them from the hotel reservation. It's a lot harder if they actually consumed the food at dinner and are not Venmoing you back, but hopefully that's just going to be a smaller amount.
Yeah, so actually I forgot. So the hack here, every time I planned a group trip, was I would try to budget out what does everything cost? How much does it cost to hire a chef and all the groceries? How much does it cost to get the transportation to and from? Let's say we plan one activity. We're going to go rent dune buggies one day. How much does it cost to rent dune buggies for everyone? Sum that entire price up and ask everyone to pay that full amount in it. And so then we have this giant budget for the trip. The benefit, by the way, if you want to get repeat business trying to help plan trips, do this because once everyone's there, they don't have to pay for anything. You're like, hey guys, let's all go ride jet skis on the beach. Great. Chris is covering it because we already paid for it all. It's all covered. We don't have to pay for the taxi down. Everything was covered. And so I never had to worry about getting paid back for the things once we were there because I tried to get paid in advance for everything. And in some cases, I would over index. And at the end, I was like, oh, guess what? Here's $50 to everyone because we all over contributed. So that's how I solved like getting paid for things on the ground when things are happening. Um, but the flight stuff, the other thing is like we would have a group thread on, at the time it was like Group Me, which now would be WhatsApp or Signal or Telegram. And I would just out it, be like, Peter has not paid anything. And now Peter doesn't have me. He's got 19 people being like, Peter, you need to pay. Like you need to send money in right now. So peer pressure also helps.
That's true. That helps a lot if you have to be the one person who's like, Venmo me back, Venmo me back. But if they have a lot of people saying, this is a group trip, you have to contribute to the group, that's going to help a lot too.
Yeah.
Were you ever using points to cover like your flights on this as well? Or were you using points for any of it? Or it's just purely earning points in this phase?
I really struggled with this because there was one particular trip where most of my friends were like, let's all splurge and fly in business class. And like business class to Cabo is not like business class to Tokyo. It's not 10 times more expensive. But there was just no way to do it with points because we were booking like half the cabin. And so there were no availability. And so one time, I think this might be the only time ever, I was like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to spend the extra $300 and fly in business. And I think I need more of this attitude in my life. My perspective was, look, I already made 100,000 points on this trip. Like, just spend the $300 and make it like the trip that you want. Um, that's an attitude I want more of in my life. But no, it's hard when you're trying to plan things like this and do something differently. Like, we were always booking villas because there were a lot of people. I personally think the house villa approach to a group trip is better than the resort approach. I'm not sure I would agree with that if I were planning a trip with like 4 families with kids. Now that we have kids, I'm like, you know what? Having our own little separate spaces is maybe a much better approach. And so later in life, if I were planning a group trip with people, I might do something differently. But back then, it was always just me using dollars, my own dollars to do it. But the points earned made up for any cost myself. Except actually, I take it back. There was one trip where someone canceled and I wasn't going on the bachelor party. I was not part of this friend group. And someone canceled at the last minute. And the bachelor, who was a friend of a friend, was like, do you want to just come? Like, we have a free ticket. The friend's not, like, you don't have to pay anything. We already have the house. And so I went to a bachelor party that I wasn't invited to because I just happened to plan it and someone canceled last minute. So I wouldn't say I used points, but I did get to go on a trip for free just by being, right place, right time.
That is a different kind of travel hack right there.
Yeah, I
No.
will say it's weird to go on a bachelor party where you don't really know that many people. So I'm not sure that was like as fun of an experience as I thought it would have been, but I got a free trip to Mexico, which was cool.
So I know you still have 11 million points, but have you ever done like a cool redemption that you want to share with anybody? Anything that is a fun idea of what to do with points?
Yeah, so, I've been fortunate to take a lot of redemptions and, fortunately almost everywhere. So I won't go through all of them, but one that is kind of a fun story that I think might inspire people to use points in a different way was for our wedding. So we had planned this honeymoon, and the idea was like when you go on your honeymoon, it's like the one time you can tell your boss, like, I'm taking a long trip, and you can, it's like a excuse to take a longer than normal. It's like, I'm gonna take 2 weeks and anything. So we're like, where's the craziest place we can go? So we decided we wanted to go to the Seychelles. And for those who don't know, they're like halfway between Africa and India. I had never even heard of the Seychelles up until the point that we started researching what are the coolest honeymoon destinations. And in hindsight, I'm like, you know what? If you live in the US, especially on the West Coast, just go to French Polynesia because it's so much closer and the experience is very similar. Seychelles are amazing, but it's like literally halfway across the world from the West Coast. But so we booked our flight with Miles and we were getting ready to book everything. And we were telling our wedding videographer, who we had not yet hired, and about our trip. And then I got the proposal price and I was like, oh, we can't afford this. Like, we had thought a wedding videographer would be the coolest thing ever. And then when we looked at the price, we were like, well, this just isn't an option. We're not going to have a wedding videographer. And she was like, well, maybe I could do something. I'm like, no, no, you're like way far off from the budget. Like, you couldn't even knock off 20% and have this be in our budget. But I'd gotten to know the videographer and she was really cool. And I had been talking about how we were going to the Seychelles. And she's like, oh man, my husband and I, that is a dream of ours. And at the time, Delta had this promotion where if you transfer miles to another person, which you had to pay to do, they would double the miles. And this was back in 2011 or 12. And so I was like, well, I just transferred 240,000 Amex points to Delta so that we could book this ticket. And it was 120,000 round trip on Air France all the way to the Seychelles. And so I was like, cool, let's see if they are interested. So I went to our videographer. I said, what if we sent you and your husband business class to the Seychelles? And she's like, well, those tickets are like $10,000. That'd be like 20 grand. That's way more than the cost of the wedding. I was like, yeah, well, for me, it's way less than the cost of the wedding. So I was like, would you be up for it? She's like, cool. So she ended up doing the wedding for free and we sent them to the Seychelles. And all I had to do was transfer the points from my account to my wife's account and paid what I want to remember is somewhere around $1,000 in transferring point fees. But because they got doubled, I could book the trip twice. And so we got our wedding videography for free, other than the about $1,000 to double our Delta points. And both groups, fortunately separately, we did not go on the trip together, but got a trip to Africa in business class.
If you are listening to this episode thinking, I wish I could travel like this, but I don't know where to start, I offer free credit card consultations by email at geobreezetravel.com/consultations. Additionally, I host a masterclass and group coaching session each month through the Patreon. We've also added a new Patreon feature. Once you've been in the Patreon for 12 consecutive months, I will gift you a vacation voucher to the city of your choice. I've also added an option to sign up for an annual membership. With this option, you will get 2 free masterclasses each year, and you'll get your vacation package voucher upfront. You can find more information about the vacation vouchers, consultations, and more in the show notes. This week's Patreon shout out goes out to Alex. Thank you so much for being a part of the Geobreeze Travel Patreon community.
For anyone who's like really a points nerd, the final bonus that was amazing was that Air France actually, I feel like this is becoming a theme. Air France stopped flying to the Seychelles. Fortunately, they stopped flying to the Seychelles before we left. And so we were like, well, that's a bummer. We have a flight to Paris, but now we have to get to the Seychelles. Fortunately, Air France was like, we need to put you on another flight and we need to do it in a commensurate cabin. So it was in business class. So they booked us from Paris down on Etihad and back on Emirates. And for some reason, I don't know how, I don't know why, the Emirates flight was actually in first, not in business. And so on our honeymoon with, Delta miles that we thought would be on Air France, we ended up in Emirates first suites flying from Paris down to the Seychelles, which was, a nice little added touch.
That worked out way better than the Spirit Airlines not flying around anymore.
Yes. So what I've learned is if someone's going to cancel your airline, just don't let it be Spirit.
That is an amazing redemption story, a very unique one too. With all of the knowledge and information that you've soaked up over the years on how to use points and miles, how to earn points and miles, all of the hacks, what would you say is your number one best piece of travel hacking advice for listeners today that I can fit on an Instagram quote card?
So my first reaction is just go, which definitely fits on an Instagram quote card, but certainly doesn't have enough context. But what I mean by just go is so many times we get caught up in the idea of what's the perfect trip? What city do I go to? What place do I go to? At the end of the day, I try to remind myself this: no matter where you go, you're probably gonna have a good time. Traveling is like the most amazing thing in the world. Meeting people, seeing things, eating foods from cultures and countries around the world is something that you can't really replicate with another experience. And so you can spend all your time trying to figure out what the best redemption is to go to what place or which of the 6 hotels in this one city are the best. But you're going to have the most fun if you just go. And so I'm not saying go into debt. I'm not saying take out loans, but if you can get a good price, whether it's, using Scott's cheap flights and waiting for a good fare, or it's using your miles and points, find a place that you can go to, enjoy it, eat the local food, and yeah, we got to fit that in. So just take the trip, have a good time, and eat something crazy. There's
I
there's
love
my I
it.
feel like that'll fit on an Instagram quote.
I love it. And speaking of great advice, can you give a shout outs to other people on the internet that listeners should go follow for points and miles tips?
I'm much more of a Twitter than Instagram person. The only points and miles person I follow on Instagram is you, and that fills a lot of content. So, but I assume everyone listening is already doing that. On Twitter, I follow a lot of the kind of like OG frequent miler, 1 mile at a time, view from the wing. These are all probably not new sources. I still am like old school and love flyer talk for content. So this isn't necessarily a person to follow, though you can follow specific threads. So if you're trying to plan a trip to a specific property, and somehow I've never unsubscribed from the Hilton in the Seychelles, but I went in and I followed that thread, and anytime someone posted something about it, I'd get an alert. So if there's specific properties you're really looking to stay at or want information about, I think Flyer Talk has the best information. We just took a last minute, like, book within 1 week trip to Bora Bora, and I was like not sure what the St. Regis was like. So I went to Flyer Talk, and someone had uploaded the QR codes from every single one of the restaurants' menus. So, like, if you wanted to know everything you could eat, all the schedule of activities throughout the day, stuff that usually the hotel doesn't put on the website, you can find that usually in the Flyer Talk thread, which there is one for almost every luxury, property in the world on. So I'm still old school using forums. I do some Reddit searches as well, but Flyer Talk has so much information that it's where I find a lot of information.
Awesome. And where can we find you on the internet?
Yeah. So, like we said earlier, I have a podcast. It's called All the Hacks. It's just allthehacks.com. We also have a newsletter. I try every week to bring people to some sort of new optimization in their life. And I'd say a good number of them are about travel and points and miles, but a lot of them are about money. And a lot of them are about other aspects of life, finding happiness, finding success in your career, optimizing the way you work, optimizing your daily routines. So we've had everyone from, gold medal Olympians to CEOs to, people that love points and miles. And we try to dig into stuff every week that will inspire people to find more optimal versions of their life and be happier and travel. So check it out. You're listening to a podcast right now, so it's really easy. You could just search All the Hacks in whatever app you're in. And if you have any other questions or want to reach out, you can find me on Twitter. My email is just chris@allthehacks.com, and I try to respond to everything.
If you guys like this podcast, you'll like Chris's podcast. So go check it out.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. This was such a fun conversation, a very unique strategy for how to earn a lot of points. Now you just need fun ways to use all of those points that you earn. But this is definitely such a unique and creative way. And we learned a lot of different hacks about group travel, villas, hire a private chef, how to make sure you're paid on time. So thank you so much for sharing all of this with us today. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Geobreeze Travel Podcast. If any of the cards mentioned in today's episode piqued your interest, please check out the links in the show notes for more information on any of the cards. Also, if you apply for a card using the links on that page, I may receive a commission too, so please and thank you. P.S. I hear the links work better in Internet Explorer or Safari, and sometimes the credit card applications tend to glitch out in Chrome. Additionally, it would mean the world to me if you could subscribe to this podcast, leave a 5-star review, and share it with a friend. And if you would like to make even more travel hacking friends, please sign up for the Patreon to access our monthly masterclass hangouts. We dive deep into a particular points program each month, and you'll get to ask all of your travel hacking questions and enjoy being around other people who enjoy points and miles just as much as you and I do. If you would like an invite to the next one, head over to geobreezetravel.com/hangouts to sign up to be on the invite list. Take care and happy travels!